The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Joining us now for further reactions to this new executive order from the president from Washington, D.C. is Kristin Smith, executive director of the Blockchain Association, one of the crypto industry's largest lobbying groups. Welcome, Kristin.
Great to be here, Emily.
Great to have you back. So, given that Nick just gave a pretty good overview of this executive order, just from your perspective, what is the big takeaway here? What is the most important thing about this for the industry?
I think there are two big takeaways, and going off the last segment, this isn't a nothing burger. This matters, and it matters for two reasons. The first is that the President of the United States has now said that digital assets create an opportunity to reinforce American leadership. This is a big deal and a very, very different tone than we saw in the last administration. So I think this is tremendous progress forward. What this also does is it sets out a framework for policymakers to examine, to study, and to learn about these issues. Now, as Nick noted in the previous segment, agencies have been looking at this for a long time, as has Congress, but now we'll have a more coordinated way of examining this and a very thorough way of looking at the issues out there. I'm very excited to see that there aren't any predetermined policy positions in this paper. That's not there in this executive order. That's not the place that we want to be right now. We want to be examining, proposing policy solutions, identifying what the key issues are, and then further down the road in the process, we can figure out what are the best ways to address those issues. Do we need legislation? Can this be done with regulation? But it's just a much more orderly and methodical way to achieving good policy. And it's certainly in stark contrast to where we were last summer, where we were battling, last minute provisions that were tucked into bills. That's the wrong way to do that. This is the right way to do it.
So we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but I'm just curious, since you're such an insider in Washington, just about the timing of this executive order. Now, I know this has been in the works for a long time. It's been reported on for a long time. But, given everything that's going on in the world right now, it seems like it might not be the biggest priority for this week, right? And so I'm just curious if you have the impression that, all the sort of the rising chorus of voices in Washington being concerned about crypto as a tool of sanctions invasion might have, pushed this executive order to be issued right now, like if there was any relationship at all.
I think that may have had a little bit to do with it, but this was something, as you've noted, that's been in the work for months. It's something that I think was ready to go prior to the situation in Ukraine heating up, and that if that hadn't happened, this probably would have happened a couple weeks earlier. That being said, I think if you look at the debate around sanctions, if you go to those in government that have deeper experience in this, like the National Security Council or the Treasury Department or the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they have all said they are not concerned about Russia using cryptocurrency to evade sanctions. That's in stark contrast to a couple policymakers on Capitol Hill, notably Senator Elizabeth Warren, who are asking questions about that. So I think, I think that that's certainly a hot issue right now, and that having this executive order out there will put in a more thoughtful process for examining this. But, my takeaway from what we've seen is that the cryptocurrency industry is very, very up to speed on their compliance obligations. They are complying with all of the sanctions. There's no evidence that Russia is using cryptocurrency to evade these sanctions. But moreover, we're seeing the benefits of crypto in a crisis like this. Like, we're seeing money being raised using crypto networks to send to NGOs and the Ukrainian government itself. And then we're also seeing individuals who are uprooted from their homes that are able to take value with them because they have cryptocurrency. So, these are all good stories, I think, that we have to tell. And when we have an open process like this executive order, where there is going to be study and then the public can react, other policymakers can react, it'll give us an opportunity to further go into the benefits of digital assets.
So, good morning, Kristin. So it seems you're fairly positive. You have a fairly positive outlook towards this proposed study. Nonetheless, what could go wrong, and what are you doing to stop it?
Yeah. So, the interesting thing about this, at least as of the time I dialed in to do this segment, we actually haven't seen the actual full text of the executive order. We've only seen the fact sheet, which is fairly specific, and we expect the two to be similar. But what could happen is that federal agencies during the next 180 days come back with proposals that are at odds with the crypto industry. That would probably be the biggest risk out here. But what this does is it really hones in on a specific set of questions, and it allows us as the crypto industry, whether it be the Blockchain Association or individual companies within this space, to go in and have detailed conversations and educate agencies about the topics that they care about. And so, I'm optimistic that that process will lead to sounder recommendations. But, the good news is I think that the political power of the crypto community is on the rise. I think what happened with the infrastructure bill and all the phone calls that went into the Senate was incredibly powerful. We're seeing an uptick in political fundraising to pro-crypto candidates, and we're seeing more companies hire people in Washington to work full time on these issues. So the more time for that infrastructure and that political strength to grow will allow us to better influence specific policy issues. And remember, when these reports are done, this doesn't mean those policies are immediately enacted. There are rulemakings that may need to happen. There's legislation that may need to happen. We may find that there's a certain area that's already settled and we don't need to have any work done. So the 180 days is more of the early stage process than a later stage process. I think that these are going to be issues that we continue to work on for years to come.
Nonetheless, are you in talks right now, for instance, with different government agencies and departments to further the agenda of the Blockchain
Yeah, absolutely.
Association?
That's we have two primary functions at the association. One is to come up with policy proposals, which, as you could imagine, is challenging given the pace at which this industry is moving. But the second is to be a liaison to government. We have a government relations department that is constantly in communication with various congressional offices, various regulatory agencies, and also the White House. So we aim to be a resource. We want to provide education, but we also want to come to the table with solutions. It takes a little time to develop those and do that right, but it's an ongoing process, and we are trying to be responsive to all inquiries that are coming in.
I saw that Jeremy Allaire, he said that this is a watershed moment for crypto, and I do see a lot of positive sentiment in that regard. But also, there are several critics, particularly aimed at Gary Gensler and the current administration, of just how hard they'll tamp down on crypto, because a lot of folks thought Gary Gensler would be crypto friendly. Turns out many folks believe that he isn't. So I wonder what you feel the tone of this administration will be, and who will it become something like what we saw in New York with a bit license, or do you think they'll be more forgiving?
Yeah, well, I think Gary Gensler is certainly thinking very deeply about these issues. And I think from the industry perspective, we differ in the level of clarity that exists in securities laws today. He thinks they're very clear and everyone should come register. We think that we need to have a much more thoughtful approach to doing that. I actually think this executive order could have the effect of slowing him down in his process. Right now, there's a call for study, there's a call for reports. The next 180 days, in theory, should not be a time for agencies to issue new guidance or push through new rulemakings. What this should be is an opportunity to thoughtfully lay out the issues that need to be addressed. And so, listen, anything could happen, and Gary Gensler could take various actions on the enforcement front or on the guidance front any day now, and he certainly has an open rulemaking on alternative trading systems that could potentially have impacts for crypto. But I do think that having this executive order in place really sort of pauses any quick action that agencies might do, because I think what this administration is indicating they want to see is a comprehensive and coordinated approach, and also they want to see the time needed in order to do that correctly. So this should buy us some time with Gary Gensler.